year. With that in mind, I thought it was very interesting that CBS Sports, in their collection of writers, they do this every year. I like lists. The off-season time of year is a good time for lists, and all that's really fun. And in their list, they've now put out of the top coaches in college football, Kirby Smart comes in with a lofty ranking at number 7. That's pretty high compared to the 130 coaches that coach college football, but it is lower than he was a year ago. And in the midst of explaining why Smart is 7th on this list and not higher, CBS kind of gives you some pretty stern words about the way their collection of writers, Tom Fornelli is the guy that's collecting all these words, but it's the rest of the team there kind of weighing in on all this. The writers there at CBS kind of give you some pretty stern words about how at least this aspect of the national media, how they kind of view Kirby Smart. Let me show you this on the screen here when it comes to what CBS says about Georgia and the fact they have Smart ranked 7th as their top coach in college football. But Tom Fornelli says, we're starting to see our voters reach the point where Kirby Smart needs to show them more, he says. You can only be a title contender for so long without winning one before patience wears thin. That's Tom Fornelli saying patience is wearing thin with Kirby Smart. Time for him to show us more. Time for him to kind of take that next step towards getting back to college football playoff or winning the national championship, whatever that kind of next step is sort of viewed to be for Kirby Smart. And I don't think it's unfair to say, okay, now it's time to do a little bit more. There was a little bit of program regression, over the course of the last couple of years. As we've kind of cited before, Georgia went from being in the playoff to, losing close in the SEC championship game to losing in kind of, blowout fashion in the SEC championship game in 2019 to not even making the title game last year. That's the wrong progression that you want to be on when it comes to that for Georgia. I don't think it's wrong to acknowledge that in 2021, given all that Georgia seems to have going for it right now, that it needs to be better than that this year. It needs to be more than that this year. It's time to do that. Now, I would say it's not past time and it's not, championship or bust, window's about to close. It's just simply time. It's just simply time for that to happen. Georgia to have a better season this year than it has had the last couple of years. I don't think many Georgia fans would think it's unfair for CBS to say that either. That there's a little bit of restlessness for Georgia. This is well-earned restlessness over a number of decades leading up to this, but it is time for Georgia to be better this year than it's been the last couple of years. However, what I don't like, and I think this is something else that I think the Georgia fans will agree with me on, using a list like this decided as some sort of example of Kirby Smart being lesser as a coach than maybe other Georgia fans want to believe him to be. This is the thing that I think a lot of media and a lot of non-Georgia fans simply get wrong about Kirby. This idea of somehow he's deficient as a coach or somehow he hasn't proven himself over the course of his first, 6 years, I guess, as a head coach there at UGA. The fact that he hasn't, done more, I guess we're going into the 6th year or whatever, but the fact that he hasn't done more than he has, somehow that's some sort of blight against his resume. And the truth is, the CBS list that I just cited as an example of is as much proof as you need for exactly what Kirby Smart has done as Georgia coach going back to 2016. If you look at Smart's ranking on this list, only at number 7, I think you can make a case that's actually too low for Smart. He ought to be higher on this list, if for no other reason than the fact that Smart's got 4 head-to-head wins against guys who are ranked ahead of him. Jimbo Fisher's a spot just above him at number 6. Jimbo does have a college football national championship, so maybe that's the reason why he gets that nod over Kirby. But Smart has the head-to-head win over Jimbo going back 2019. Brian Kelly comes on this list at number 5. The CBS writers fall all over themselves to praise Brian Kelly, but the fact of the matter is Kirby Smart beat Kelly twice just in the last few years. Beat him in Athens in 2019, went into his own stadium up there in South Bend, took the place over, painted it red, and walked out of there with a win, back in 2017 there as well. The idea that you would rank Brian Kelly ahead of Kirby Smart on a list like this, I honestly don't know how you get there, given the fact that Notre Dame's claim to fame are college football playoff appearances built on the back of a bunch of wins against nondescript, unimpressive foes, but when matched up against the very best teams in the country, teams that come from the SEC or teams that have a similar level of talent, the Fighting Irish never show up. Kelly's ranking on a list like this is built almost exclusively on the back of the meager schedule that a team like Notre Dame collects its wins against. And then you talk about Lincoln Riley at number 3 on this list. Media types just love Lincoln Riley because he scores a bunch of points and he gives a bunch of quotes and all kinds of stuff like that. But we saw these two guys head to head. Lincoln Riley had the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Baker Mayfield. Lincoln Riley had the big halftime lead. But the brilliant coach, number 3 on the CBS list, could not hold that halftime lead against Kirby Smart in the Rose Bowl at the end of the 2017 season. Smart got that head-to-head win. The only, I guess, knock on Kirby Smart on the basis of this is the fact that he has lost 3 times to Nick Saban. But if we're only judging coaches as successful compared to what they've done against Nick Saban, then there are a lot of coaches in college football who are going to end up being lacking on a list like that. I mean, all told, if I'm doing the math right in my head, if you look at the top 10 coaches in college football, the other 9 other than Smart, with Dan Mullen coming in at number 10 on this list, Smart's record against the top 10 coaches, according to CBS Sports, is actually 7-4 head-to-head, and that's for a guy who's only been a head coach since 2016. Now, I'm not telling you that's enough, and I'm not telling you that Georgia fans ought to be satisfied with that alone, but I am going to tell you that's a pretty good start for a head coach at this point in his tenure as a head coach, and I would say the best is still yet to come. The CBS folks would say, it's time for some of that stuff to start happening in 2021. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But the fact that so much has happened for Smart, beating Dan Mullen 3 times, winning a Rose Bowl against Lincoln Riley, being in multiple SEC championships, having an SEC championship to call his own, making the college football playoff, I would say that's enough evidence for me to believe that Smart could be well on his way to satisfying those critics who are tapping their watch and saying, when's the next big moment going to come for Georgia? I understand where that impatience comes from, but I've seen enough from Smart to lead me to believe he's going to deliver on that eventually.